Well, that was a little bit stupid. Yeah, obviously hit the wrong button, blah 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 blah. So shit happens, as they say. It's hot here. I should have put the other fan on. That's what I should have done. But anyway, yeah, I really didn't have a clear agenda here, and so my bad. Mostly, I should. Okay, so right. Yeah, no, it's just a mistake switching over from the two computers to play off the base clip. My bad. So let's just finish it up. I did it again. I keep hitting the two keyboards.
Gravity's
Keep hitting the
so
wrong
weak
keyboard.
over there. It's not existent. It has an effect, and therefore it will lens to somebody at some distance.
All right, well, it just won't, okay? It's called visible lensing, okay? So to have visible lensing, you have to have a certain amount of diffraction, and there's no formula that makes that possible unless you have the gravitational body like 5 feet away from you or something. It's just not going to happen in any real circumstance in the real universe. So that really won't make a difference. So your point is moot and stupid.
Explained this before.
Look, I don't need anything.
I
don't need anything explained. All right, I'm just going to point out these two things. When you compare them to each other size-wise, they have a relationship. So if this was to the side of this box, this thing has a relationship. And the point is, when you go further and further away, now this thing is much smaller. You can't really see it, but it's much smaller as a percentage of this surface from its perspective. Okay, so you turn them this way, you get the idea that big battery here, little box here, the other way around, little battery over here, big giant box there. So there you really get the view of it. So the percentage of this to this, and that's it. Okay, so the argument's over. That's the truth of it. The amount of gravity is minimal. Like I said, Einstein illustrated it. I think he might even have drawn a picture in his papers, but I'm sure other people have. It's explicitly stated, the formulas dictate that it has to be a surface phenomenon, because it's only around the surfaces that you're going to have gravity that's of sufficient strength. It's game over. Light moves too fast otherwise. Oops, wrong keyboard again.
Ever video to Inmendum. Probably my shortest ever video. Inmendum, it's not Einstein.
Yeah, why is it starting it over
it's
again?
Not Einstein.
Must have been the end of the video.
It's general relativity.
Yeah, fuck you.
It's
fuck you.
irrelevant now what Einstein
it's
said.
irrelevant what Einstein
and therefore it will lens to somebody at some distance. I've explained this before.
Well, yeah, it won't. You won't get visible lensing, so you're just an idiot. So thank you for validating it. It's not in any description of a black hole or anything. You'll never find lensing a million light years away from a black hole. The light won't get lensed, even though it's a black hole. It's not going to get lensed because the gravity is not sufficient to bend it sufficiently. You're an idiot. All right, enough of that. You know what live means? L000, live, question mark. You don't know what that means? It says it right on my screen here. It says live. It says it in two places on my screen. You don't know what a live room is? The person is actually conducting it in real time. If it said real time room, you could figure it out then, but you can't figure out live. Yeah, well, just saying, live question mark. I just don't understand. If you're watching it well, okay, I guess okay. All right. I guess it was, look, it's my bad that the room broke. My bad there's two rooms. So yeah, I guess you could, but it probably says right on your screen, right? It probably has that little live icon there. And you know, when you hit it, it turns red if you're live. And if it's not red, then you're not live, that kind of thing. But it doesn't matter. Sorry. Reasonable. Gee, I'm smoking too many of these. Greatest human on earth sent me some cigarettes, and it's very nice. All right, so what problem did I want to deal with here? All right, well, this is kind of it's kind of important, and but yeah, I'm not really articulating it very well. I do with my paper. There it is. But I mean, this is where you really can understand the fundamental mistake they make, you know, in physics, and not realizing that this force thing has to be a particle force, just because of the way it is admitted. You know, and that all the forces have the same pattern, so they all have the speed of light. You know, it's really annoying because that stupid Theoria Papapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapapap arguments and did a video that was completely useless in that you couldn't see any of the effects he says there were. And what they mean, who the fuck knows? I mean, I don't know why it would mean anything to anybody. But what he did reference was this, whatever, Korsakoff effect or something, of the blue light created in like nuclear reactors and stuff. And, they imply that this is light moving faster than the speed of light. And that's not what it is. I mean, it's just it doesn't move faster than light. It moves faster than light would through the medium. So if light usually moves at a certain speed through a medium, when this effect is happening, it means that electrons are moving faster than photons would move in that medium. So like glass, for example, slows light down by 40%. I mean, it's a significant slowdown. But the light isn't really slowing down. The light's just taking a longer path. And so the argument is that under certain conditions, electrons can move faster than light propagating through a surface. But it's not moving faster than light. It's not going faster than the speed of light. It's going faster than the speed of light in the medium. And it's just such a distortion. So he's perfectly willing to imply that something went faster than the constant that is the speed of light. And it didn't go faster than that constant. It didn't break the speed limit. It's like sound traveling through objects too. I mean, it's just there's a certain the speed changes depending on the medium, and there's just no point in saying it's it's going faster, because it's not. It's going faster than it goes in that medium. But these are the distortions everywhere. So anyway, so the important thing for me was the idea of the dimensions, and and that really explains the whole inverse square thing. So you have these 3 dimensions: forward, back, up, down, left, right. And obviously a force moves forward, so that dimension's used up. And then it has a density in the other 2 dimensions. So as the force propagates, as it moves forward, the bits of the force, it's clear that it's a particulated or quantized force, and that what is changing is the distance between the elements of the force, the particles. So there was a movie, Black Sunday, where a guy built a terrorist, built a Bruce Dern, a weapon with darts. out of a boat. And the idea was the explosive would shoot all the darts out of this plastered boat, you know, and it would send all the darts on an individual trajectory. So at the right altitude, it would spread these darts over an entire football stadium, you know, and kill everybody. But that's like gravity. That's like what these forces do. They're like little individual darts. They start right next to each other, and they leave at a slightly divergent path. And that's how gravity works. Now, if gravity was a laser kind of force, you know, a straight line force in a more, you know, a culminated force, and that everything came out parallel, you know, then everything would be, this whole argument would be very different, right? Because if there wasn't any divergence in the force, then you could lens from very far away, because all the force would get to the other object. So it wouldn't matter about this. The size reduction wouldn't help, but I mean, it wouldn't be as dramatic a problem. It'd be a much less, you'd lose a lot less strength to gravity. But it's just the fact that the reason why gravity gets weaker is because it's not a laser force in the sense of a perfect laser. It doesn't stay in parallel paths, and so it diverges. And I guess that's why Susskind uses divergence, is because he constantly is thinking about it in terms of how the force is spreading, and not about the effect, in the sense that it's the opposite effect. So what's really happening is the divergence, the force is weakened on the outside, and it's really the convergence of the external force that creates the acceleration. So the acceleration is being caused by this external force being higher, greater than this internal shadowed force. So when a force is absorbed, then the other body doesn't receive it. That means the converging force from the external environment will accelerate the other body. And that's the induction of gravity. And it seems very clear to me that that's a very coherent explanation of the mechanics. And if you just reduce this to what I think most physicists would verify or accept, if you say there's a conservation element, and that all you have to do is account for the element going in and the effect of the element, and it's always going to exist. You can't kill the energy that exists, in the sense that you have to always account for an absorbed acceleration in the effect of something being accelerated. And the consequence of that acceleration is that it absorbs something else to accelerate. So there's always an absorption connected to any acceleration. They have to absorb a force. All right, and yeah, so I mean, even if you don't get into the specifics, if you don't get too detailed, I'm just saying that you can get rid of the traditional heat problem by just realizing that if the fundamental particles are quantized, and you just say that the matter, a piece of matter has quanta in it, energy, and that I'm exposing it to external energy in a direction, and that there would be an exchange, that the energy that exists inside the matter, some portion of it will be released, and it will absorb the portion moving in the direction of the gravity. And so there's a perfect conservation as long as you account for the expelling of the opposite reaction force, something in the opposite direction. So when you absorb, you have to essentially reflect, which means you have to expel what the opposite of what you're taking in. because the universe is made out of this balance thing in the end. And you can't, it's like a school of fish. If you have a school of fish of equal numbers of fish going in all directions, and you introduce a new fish going one way and that fish stays, then the only way it could stay the way it is, not moving, is that a fish has to leave going that way. That would mean it would just go straight through. So that would be a non-interaction if it goes straight through. If you release the same direction you accepted, then there's no net change. But if I take in a fish going this way and I release a fish going that way, then I can have a net change in the total velocity of the object, and it will start moving. And the moment of acceleration is the moment where the release takes place. And that happens with charges, quite obviously, in that most physicists, I think, again, would agree that moving charges, accelerating charges, not moving, accelerating charges are decelerating. So charges changing their velocity expel EMF, electromagnetic radiation, magnetism. And likewise, when gravity is absorbed, it is released in one of these perpendicular directions. You're just not likely to be able to test for that because you have to have your test instrument somehow in, it's very hard to make your put your test instrument in some location where it's close enough to measure the force, and yet not so close that it's going to be affected by the very force you're trying to measure. But you can sort of see it, I think, in just a lot of fluid dynamics. I think it does have something to do with the lift on airplanes, that when you start accelerating matter in a direction, that you essentially create, you expel EMF, gravity, polarized gravity. Some of it's just regular gravity, but some of it is polarized. And that is what's basically creating that that low pressure zone around the surfaces, is that the surface is rejecting in the perpendicular direction. It's expelling force in the perpendicular direction, and that's causing the movement of the force lines away from the wing surfaces. So it's, you know, creating the low pressure. Anyway, that's a whole different subject, really, because that's, you know, matter moving inside of matter, which is a lot different. What else? So yeah, I'm still stuck with the, I still haven't figured out exactly how to deal with, I mean, the simple argument is you just make a rule. So I could state as a minimum that it's just a rule that matter was created under an unknown circumstance. We really can't do it, you know, we can't do the alchemy thing in any kind of realistic way. We usually have to change one piece of matter into another. Like with radioactive elements, we can decay them and convert them from one radioactive element into another one. But we can only basically do that with the radioactive elements. And we can't just take a pile of energy and create, say, hydrogen. So we don't have the mechanism of the formation of atoms. So the formation of atoms, we could say, doesn't appear to be a regular process. It's a process that can only take place in certain environments. So certain environments generate matter. And those environments might just be big bangs or something. It does seem clear that it's able to convert hydrogen and helium into carbon and lithium and other elements in suns. But that's just guessing. And again, that's alchemy. It's not creating new atoms. It's just converting one atom into another form. So putting a second head on Frankenstein is a little easier than making Frankenstein. Yeah, to make the argument. All right, and so we know that matter has this property where it is energy. It is basically force. So what we traditionally call energy would be forces, and that what atoms are is the collection of force. So it suits my argument in the sense that I'm saying that gravity is a force. It's a real thing. It's a particle. And that it's the collection of those particles is what becomes what we call matter, a collection of them. But the difference is the once collected as matter, the forces now can interact. So force can interact with atoms, but it can't interact atoms, nuclear parts. So that's the other. So force can interact with electrons and protons. So it can interact with the constituents of matter, the constituents of atoms, but it can't, like force can't interact with force. You can't change a force with a force. All right, so that's the rule. You can't change a force with a force. So you can't bend light with magnetism unless the light's traveling through a medium. Can't bend allied heat with magnetism or gravity. So I don't believe you can. I don't believe there's any evidence that you can. So I'm certainly arguing that it was my suspicion once I formulated this theory, my prediction in a sense, that light is a force and that it's a quantized force. So it's just like gravity, except it has a frequency. So there's more than one graviton moving at a specific frequency. The distance between the element, the quantil parts, is their wavelength. And the theory is that this light has to travel through all kinds of bits in the universe. And clearly, if those bits were going to constantly be bending it, it couldn't make it from a faraway galaxy. It couldn't even make it from Pluto in any kind of reliable form, because the photons would be moved by the fluctuations in the field, the gravitational changes that they would constantly be moving through. And so there would be no coherent, light would be incoherent, because each photon would be in a different gravitational bend. And so it would all degrade into invisibility, because the light would lose not only its direction, it would lose its frequency. So the force can't affect light rationally, in my opinion. It's not likely. I can't think of I certainly could construct some kind of fake circumstance that would make it possible, some kind of dark matter magic to fix it if I had to, but I'm just saying there's no there's no hard evidential reason to believe it happens, and because there's no experimental evidence of light being bent by force, other forces that are much stronger than gravity. So yeah, and then once I looked into it to see why Einstein believed it was true, to see why people believed light was bent, I found that the evidence is really bad, horrible, feeble. And so the Einstein experiment, the Edinburgh experiment that validated Einstein, never repeated successfully. The Hubble telescope could do it every day, and it's never produced an image that I can find of a sun being gravitationally lensed by our sun, and our galaxy, anything being gravitationally lensed by our sun. So there's been no verification of solar lensing, and all of the galactic lensing images, generally speaking, rely on the existence of some magical dark matter to create sufficient gravity to explain how the lens could be where it is, because it's never in the location it should be, which is the strong gravity. And it's not in the location they predict it to be, around a black hole. And no, it's nowhere where their math says it should be. It's their math. And it's only when they invent dark matter that they can contrive an excuse for lensing being in some of these images. But that excuse has never been defended with any depth, because I would argue that their placement of the dark matter in the locations they've placed it would mean that that galaxy would have to collapse, or that the arms of the galaxy would be bending. That you can't have it both ways. You can't create gravity for the purpose of lensing and then pretend it has no gravitational effect on any of the other stars in the location. So it's just not sensible. It's very, very, very weak evidence of light being able to be bent by gravity. So anyway, so I have this fundamental problem of what is it in the nature of an electron that makes force capable of being manipulated or changed? Because it can't be, force can't change force in a free environment, but force is affecting force when it affects a material environment. And clearly matter is very different than force, but I mean, I'm just saying it's, in theory, the only thing it's made of is this energy, this force. A certain quanta, a certain amount of force is trapped inside of matter. Yeah, so anyway, so that's it's a slight problem in the sense that the current physics doesn't explain any of it, doesn't go anywhere near that subject matter, so it doesn't really explain it either. So it's not like I'm obligated to provide something the current model isn't providing, but yeah, it'd be really nice to be able to provide that explanation for why matter is different. What is in the construction of matter? How exactly is the force held that the force, that the fish are influenceable? So if I analogize it to a school of fish, the argument is that in the free ocean, if two fish interact, they just go through each other essentially. They can't exchange any kind of meaningful information. One fish goes, it's always they do this, or they do this and end up, one goes this way, one goes that way. So it's always purely kinetic, and essentially all interactions are invisible. And with matter, the difference is that if it's a red fish and a blue fish, and they crash into each other, the red fish goes this way, the blue fish goes this way. So the color of the fish is reversed. And so polarization is reversed. So there is a change. So the world where they miss each other and the world where they hit each other aren't the same world. So it's like the kinetic balls bouncing. You would know, okay, that what's really happening is two balls hit each other and they both fly away from each other. But I'm just saying that you can't see the difference in the sense that you can see them going through each other also if you just change your perspective, your willingness to see it that way. But if they were colored, then you would say they bounced off each other because the red would go in the opposite direction. And so then the two worlds aren't the same. The world where they completely miss each other isn't the same as the world where they hit each other because of that reflection. So matter permits reflection of polarization. I guess that's the way to say it. All right. And so it is the movement or the migration of polarization that is entirely what we see as the movement of matter. The forces aren't really moving. All that's really moving is the polarization. So when my hand does this, the force that was my hand here is still here. The only thing that changed was the redness, the polarization has moved over here. So, it makes it very interesting, is that the universe essentially isn't the density of energy here isn't more than the density of energy over here, right? So this hand doesn't have more stuff than this empty space right next to it. It's just that this is polarized stuff and this isn't. And that's what makes it visible. This is full of red, blue, green fish. This is specific fish in specific orientations that give it reflectivity in terms of it won't absorb certain polarizations and it will absorb other polarizations. So it's a polarizing filter, this, and this is not. So the filter's here. Matter creates the filter. So I guess that's a way to say it. But it's really the nuclear bits. Yeah. All right, matter, and then in parentheses, nuclear bits. Create polarizing filters. All right, so that's the ground I have to work on. That's the foundation that I have to mess with in terms of explaining why in the field there's no red fish, blue fish, and in matter there is. But it probably has something to do with the grid work. The universe has a certain Planck distance between quanta, and when they get put into matter, that distance gets changed, and it's that little subtle change that breaks the kinetic reaction and creates the ability to reflect identity. I guess identity is a good way to put it. So, yeah. Oh, anything else? But yeah, that's the big one. If I can get that one done, that's a huge one. But like I said, I already think I got enough. I got enough where this is already too sensible. in the sense that this unifies all the forces, and all we're really quibbling about is a very specific part of the mechanics. And I mean, it'd be nice to know, but current physics doesn't have a clue. So I think the fact that I've tied velocity and acceleration to gravity and magnetism, and explain how it's just this dimensional function, you know, that if you move in one direction and you you spread in the other dimensions, in a sense. You become more or less, you exist more or less in the other dimensions. Photons would be the perfect one-dimensional object. They have no reality up, down, left, or right. They only have reality forward. And that's the fundamental description of a force. All force is in that form of a one-dimensional speed of light. Quanta. Thing. Kinetic. You have to have a word for it. Which I'm not doing right now. So anyway, this room was a bit of a fail. It's partly my fault. And yeah, I just don't know if I have enough to just keep babbling. It's just a matter of getting my own thoughts prioritized on what I have to try to imagine. Difficult part is the 3 dimensions, because it's hard to use your imagination in 3 dimensions. It always tends to just keep changing the 2 dimensions, you know, so it just keeps doing 2 dimensions from different angles. But it can never quite do all 3 at once. And you know, all these interactions are happening in all 3, and they all have that's what they're traveling through. So even light that only has one-dimensional reality it's still moving through a 3-dimensional universe. So it's still relevant in the other 2 dimensions, in the sense that what it will interact with exists in all 3 dimensions, i.e. electrons. All right, yeah, I want to do some more on that whole electron thing. It's 3 colors, 3 orbits that are the 3 colors. You know, that symbol they use for nuclear energy, where they get the spirally things. It's almost like that symbol should be the symbol for the electron. So I think that's how the electron is configured, is that it has planes, has orbits that are in specific planes in the 3 dimensions. So it has an orbit this way, an orbit this way, and an orbit this way. You see, it's just so hard to, I really have to practice doing it. It's like juggling or something. You have to practice. Spins this way, spins this way. Where's the other dimension? This way, this way. I can't find it. This way. I did that. No, this way, and this way. Okay. I have to practice. well, whatever. I mean, to say anything is contingent on the perceiver is just, in my opinion, the silliest religious, mushiest crap anybody could ever invent. I mean, there's absolutely no evidence ever, anywhere, nothing in all of evidence. You take all the evidence that's ever been collected, and you'll never find any evidence that witnesses have anything to do with crimes. I mean, that perceivers have anything to do with whether something did or did not happen. Niagara Falls doesn't need watchers for the water to fall down the waterfall. There's just no evidence that watchers are at all necessary. So yes, perceivers are not, they're only interacting, and then they're seeing photons bouncing off of something. But that's the extent of their participation. They're in a sense victims of reality. They can't possibly be perpetrators of it. I mean, by perception alone. I'm just, it's just silly. Your brain is creating an image of reality, and that image is confined inside your brain, and it just doesn't have much or anything to do with the water going down Niagara Falls. Your brain can't manipulate a single photon in its path. Your brain has no power to make reality beyond the filtered synthesis through your senses. But as you're not making reality, you're making poo or something. You're making a thing. You're not a new thing. You're not making an external thing, something different. You're not creating reality. You're a product of it. So I mean, it's not that it's offensive, but his comment was, without offense, is this contingent on the perceiver? I mean, it's just, I wonder why people even, I mean, there was just no point in my life where I took anything like that even a tiny bit seriously. I mean, beyond, daydreams about having, ESP or something and being able to make airplanes crash or something. I mean, beyond a few, happy thoughts about dropping buildings on people with my brain. But those are clearly just silly fantasies. I didn't think there was any, like, yeah, that's really going to happen. I'm going to manipulate the universe with my thoughts. Yeah, no, I'm not. I understand this as an attempt to explain the materia, the ability to perceive and interpret in terms of the philosophy with regard to value in human terms. Well, I'm just saying there's, what people value or even how they value is a philosophical argument, and it's an attempt to describe reality. I'm just saying the only thing I can see of any value is feelings. Consciousness is interesting. It creates these things called sensations. Some of the sensations suck, some of them don't suck. So the simplest fact you can state with, I think, complete confidence is that the suck sensations should be minimized. There. I mean, I think we're done with doing the value thing. So now it's just applying the formula to the reality and saying, in this circumstance, how do I reduce the most amount of suck? And frankly, the easiest way to reduce it is not to create the silly feeling thing in the first place, because they are of no function. They don't do anything useful or productive. The universe doesn't need them. The absent Martians are not a deficit to the universe. No one cries any tears. So, no, I mean, it's, you know, I'm just saying that physics is the description of the material world. Our brain's material. It functions within that world. So, yeah, you can bend physics into a conversation about philosophy. But in the end, I think physics is more about understanding force dynamics than the complexity of you know, human delusions, or, you know, illusions. And that's what your consciousness is. It's just a thing created inside of a brain. It's just an impression inside the clay your brain made. When your brain made the clay and then it put an impression in it. I mean, it's it's completely an internal function. It's the theater of the mind is not in real space. It's just in programming language. It exists in the matrix of our brain. It doesn't exist in the real world beyond the fact that it exists in our brain. It exists as a cartoon in our brain, as a synthesis. But it's not there's no real theater. There's just the formula of perception. And that's it. But like I said, this is a little bit tangential to the primary dimension of physics. But see, you can say anything. You just put any word down, and you know, somebody just type frog, and then I'll somehow make frog relevant to this conversation. But yeah, that's not really what I'm trying to do here. Just trying to gather my thoughts and partially, and see if there's anybody willing to argue, defend conventional physics, because I don't think it's defendable. I think it's miscalculated. It's gotten the foundation wrong in a couple of key places, and you can just see, in a sense, that much of what they're doing now is just fixing what's fundamentally broken with cartoon glue. You know, they're just using cartoons of Huygens and dark matter and dark energy and black holes to fix what they've broken. Yeah. So, anyway, I guess, you know, no point in beating a dead horse brain. You know, I'm just not as I'm not as agenda'd as I need to be to do one of these rooms. I just really ought to work on the bigger picture stuff and get that done, and try to find a venue for its publication, and not get too obsessed with getting every single detail, because it just might not be an accessible detail. I don't want to get stuck on it. I think that happened to Darwin. It took him 10 years to do his On the Origin of Species, and I think what was hanging him, he was looking for a mechanism. You know, he was trying to figure out you know, he didn't know what a chromosome was, didn't know about DNA, and he was trying to figure out how this attribute of your individuality was somehow conveyed through this act of sex, where somehow information about who you are was somehow being exchanged with the other person and combined, and he just didn't know about enough detail to be able to explain that. And you know, I think that bothered him, that he was going to publish incompletely because he didn't have a mechanism to carry the to explain what was being, I mean, he knew it was a quality, but he just didn't know how to describe the quality of how it would be possible for you to condense me into something I inject into a woman, that somehow this sperm and egg would end up creating identity. That somehow my identity would end up in the sperm. And he just didn't have a way of explaining how you could take something as complex as all these features about me and make those features transferable, and why they were transferable in such kind of an imprecise way where you know, the same male and female could create different children. Like, it didn't work the same way each time. So what they were carrying was a different package of that substance. So what the fuck is this shit? I don't really go for that Arabic slop or whatever that crap is. I don't know why did somebody type that shit? You hear me speaking English, right? Yeah, well, I didn't find DNA until much later, and Mendel's experiments, you know, were helpful in kind of explaining at least the math of the genetics in terms of dominant and recessive components. But I'm just saying Darwin just didn't have a mechanism. Let's see. Well, I don't know. You know, I guess people just show up here so they can say things like, "Hey, please block me." Okay. Do my best. Yeah. All right, block you. And then this other person with their whatever, the flamanges. Thank you very much, but really don't interested in any flamanges. Weird people in the world. So yes, for the people not seeing the comments, you know, just people just type incomprehensible gibberish. And you're like, what the hell do people show up and do that for? I mean, why? You're just like, God, you know, these should all be tests. You know, the government should just set up tests like this and see if somebody posts irrational babble on a message board, then the government should go out and just shoot them, or, you know, in some way dispose of them quickly and harmlessly, because it's just too stupid. I mean, you can't. You're just not playing the game anywhere close to by the rules, so to speak, if you're just going to be throwing more irrational crap into an already difficult situation. I mean, it's just such useless behavior. I just can't understand these people. I can't twist my brain into a stupid enough pretzel to imagine why I would do that. And what fucking thought could they have in their head to say, this makes sense, this is what I'll do with my life? I'll not only type shit anonymously, but I'll type incomprehensible mush. There's no good reason for that. There's no reason. It's not even a good reason. It's just not rational. Yeah, that's all that can be said. So anyway, still lingering a little bit just to see if something shows up. Doesn't look too good. So maybe next time, as they say. I have just a lot of stuff I've been working on, a lot of things I'm doing, so I just haven't had time. I gotta spend more time on this. Gotta get this done. It's just gonna be liberated. No, I like physics, but I mean, yeah, I've already, it's like, yeah, I already done enough of this stuff. I already got enough of it figured out for my, I mean, I'm perfectly satisfied now with my understanding of the physics. It's a complete enough picture for me. So now it's just proving it and moving on. Well, I really wasn't speaking on the evolution of life. I was making a comparison between myself or anyone creating a theory and the fact that, you know, there's always going to be some element that might be incomplete in that theory, and that's going to be frustrating because you'd like to be able to provide everything, you know, entirely. And it's, you know, maybe it's just a hang up of perfectionism or something. But yeah, when you're challenging the status quo, like Darwin sort of challenging God, and you know, the most people believe so strongly, and he just, you know, he would have liked to have a more complete theory. I think that's why it just took him a while to publish, is because he just wanted to see if he could figure that one out before he published. So, I mean, there's not much to say on the evolution of life. It's just a fact, you know. I mean, the evidence of evolution is overwhelming. I mean, it's preposterously excessive. You just almost can't get more proven. But that's sort of the evolution of things, you know. It's I mean, I think in hindsight, this is going to be just so obvious. It's going to be like, well, why didn't people believe this? Why did this take so long? Be lots of why questions about this. Just as, like I said, Darwin's grandfather was an evolutionist.
Could be a new post.
Yeah, somebody probably posted shit on my message board. Yeah, probably. Yes. Eating out the butts has been linked to increasing cases of gingivitis. Isn't that so fucking interesting? Yeah, people just suck. Anyway, I mean, just so useless. No, turn off the old audio notices for sure again, because I really don't need to be notified of that shit. I just can't figure out why people are just stupid. Just no reason to be this stupid, people. No reason. Hey, you're supposed to turn off. My auto notice is off. It's not turning off. Oh, very strange. Let's see if I refresh it. Yeah, there we go. Little bugs. Anyway. I said anyway a few times already. Yeah, it's probably enough anyway. All right, so yeah, the comments really weren't worth saving this week, so I don't think I'll bother this day. And we'll call it a day and just surrender. And so until the next time, and such and so forth and whatnot. Sorry about the interruption in the room and whatnot. Blah 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 blah.